Welcome to this APES review video. I'm Alex Brown and I'm going to be the one doing this assignment. So first off, some basics. So the assignment I'm doing today is a freshwater ecosystem. And a freshwater ecosystem is any body of water that contains fresh water. So this may include rivers, lakes, and the one we're showcasing today is ponds. And of course, there's many more types of ecosystems. So the setup today is we're taking on a tour of a little pond nearby my house. And we're looking at three things today. We're looking at algae blooms and dead zones associated with them, sources of dissolved oxygen, and a basic overview of the ecosystem that is present in the pond.
Now, this is the pond that we'll be looking at. So on to the first point, algae and algae blooms. You'll notice this pond does not have a lot of algae. There's a bit of algae underwater, but it's not really that visible for camera. You're just going to take my word on this. There actually is some algae here. But when algae blooms, what happens really is the algae will cover like the entire surface of the pond. So up the sides and on the top, and especially on the top is where it's important. When it goes on the top of a pond, lake, of any freshwater system, what will happen is the algae will prevent photosynthesis for plants underneath it. So that might include other algae, which are underwater, or maybe some some seaweeds, some other things. And basically, the algae will sort of block the sunlight and starve the plants beneath it. And this happens, those plants die, and they obviously can't photosynthesize anymore. And so, all of a sudden, the only photosynthesizer in the system, the only thing that's producing oxygen for the water, is the algae. And the algae doesn't really produce oxygen for water. The algae will produce oxygen, it will flow off into the atmosphere instead of dissolving and becoming dissolved oxygen underwater. And this is the issue that algae blooms cause. And algae blooms are formed when nutrients fall into an ecosystem like a freshwater ecosystem or any water ecosystem, because the nutrients allows the algae to grow a lot quicker, and algae, since it's so simple, grows really quick compared to the other organisms, which take a bit longer to grow. And so this, of course, doesn't bode well for the ecosystem. It will kill off the ecosystem, and everything in this ecosystem, if there was an algae bloom, would probably die. But for this ecosystem in particular, it probably wouldn't be an effect, because this ecosystem has a waterfall. And the waterfall is this ecosystem's main source of the dissolved oxygen. So, there's a lot of sources of dissolved oxygen. Most of them are plants, like algae. Like underwater algae is a really good source of dissolved oxygen. Seagrass, seaweed, a very good source of dissolved oxygen. But waterfalls are a very good source of dissolved oxygen, because they are basically there, and they won't run out, and they don't take plants. And what happens is the water flows down, hits, and basically when it falls, it traps some air with it, and that air, of course, has oxygen, and it goes underwater, and the air is trapped underwater, and dissolved oxygen is now put into the ecosystem. You can see all these little bubbles caused by the waterfall, and that's just an example of this effect at work. Another example is pretty obvious, is fish tanks. You notice that most fish tanks have bubblers, little areas where they pump air straight into the bottom of the fish tank, so that there's dissolved oxygen throughout the whole thing. That way, since most fish tanks, you want them to be clear, that means you don't have to have plants to maintain the dissolved oxygen in the ecosystem. Now, so that's why this ecosystem can get away with having no algae or no plants in it. Now, so moving on to what this ecosystem is made out of, you can see that this ecosystem is not like a perfect ecosystem, not like a natural one. It's more, there's not as many small organisms and not as many plants, but for this ecosystem, it's pretty stable. This one, you have algae on the sides growing, and that's the main source of food for most animals here. Now, currently, you can't see them, because I think they all died, but there were mosquito fish in this pond, and these mosquito fish would eat the algae and sort of bring it in check so that the algae wouldn't outgrow the pond and kill everything. and so that's what those mosquito fish are for. They're currently either dead or they're somewhere. I don't know exactly where. Then you have the koi. So the koi also eat the algae. You can see them right here. Hello, koi. Hello. Okay, so the koi do also eat the algae. They have a little alcove there. You see that one going into it. They can also eat the mosquito fish. They can also eat frog eggs. They can also basically eat anything that they can fit into their mouths and is edible. So you'll see them munch on things from time to time. They get to be pretty big. Like the biggest one we have there is the orange one. They're not that big right now. I think they should be bigger, but they look like most of them are fully grown. The koi get a lot bigger than that. Now, other than the stuff in the ponds. Oh look, I found a mosquito fish, guys. Yep, right there. It's gone. Okay, there is mosquito fish in this pond. Okay, so other than the koi and the mosquito fish and like the algae living in the ponds, there are a lot of other ecosystems. There's the mosquito fish, and he's going. You see him? No, you don't. Okay, so there are mosquitoes, and mosquitoes and a lot of other insects will float on the surface and will eat a lot of the algae and a lot of the plants that accumulate on the surface after a while. And so I don't see any mosquitoes right now because it's like the start of spring and the winter just ended. So, but they'll come around later, and there'll be food for the mosquito fish and for the koi, and everything will be good that way. Other than that, one thing you notice a lot, especially if you look at this pond a lot, is that there's a lot of frogs that like to hang out around here, and this is more true during the summer. So frogs will come around here, breed, lay eggs. They'll eat the mosquitoes. I think they also eat some mosquito fish. I'm not sure. It depends on the type of frog. And so the frogs basically they live outside the water ecosystem, but they also benefit from it. And then finally, the last thing that can affect this ecosystem that I've seen happen is hawks. Hawks rarely ever come to this ecosystem. I don't think they really like this one in particular because we don't like hawks. But they would come here. The only thing they'd really eat are the frogs and the koi. But the koi in this pond are put underwater, like deep. You can see that this pond is indent to prevent them from being eaten by hawks. So, yeah, the hawks don't really like this pond because the koi are very safe here. And so that's basically this pond in a nutshell.
Thank you for watching. I'll see you all in class.